Before we begin, please subscribe, like, and share this story. Your support helps more powerful stories of courage and loyalty reach the people who need them most. Some moments reveal a person's true character in less than a heartbeat. The morning sun stretched across the brick sidewalks of Franklin Square in Savannah, Georgia, painting the old oaks in warm shades of gold, while a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh coffee, blooming magnolias, and the distant salt air drifting in from the Atlantic. Street musicians tuned their guitars. Children laughed beside the fountain. Tourists wandered beneath curtains of Spanish moss, believing it would be another ordinary Saturday. No one realized they were about to witness a quiet kind of courage that could never be measured by applause. Emily Carter moved carefully through the square with one steady hand resting on the harness of her 5-year-old German Shepherd service dog. At 17, Emily had never seen a sunrise, never watched leaves dance in autumn, never looked into another person's eyes, yet she carried herself with remarkable confidence because Atlas had become the sight she never possessed. His sable coat shimmered beneath the morning light. His amber eyes remained calm and alert, and every step he took reflected thousands of hours of disciplined training mixed with something no trainer could ever teach. Love. Every pause, every turn, every gentle pull of the harness whispered the same promise. I am here. You are safe. Emily smiled as she listened to the sound around her. The splash of water from the fountain, the distant church bells marking 10 o'clock, the cheerful conversations drifting through the square. She breathed deeply and laughed softly. Smells like cinnamon today, Atlas, she whispered. The German Shepherd flicked one ear toward her voice and continued, leading her around a family, pushing a stroller before stopping precisely at the edge of a crosswalk. Even without commands, he waited patiently until traffic came to a complete stop. Across the street, Noah Walker stepped out of a neighborhood cafe, carrying a simple black coffee. At 36, the former U.S. Marine still carried himself, with the quiet discipline that years of service had carved into his posture. Tall, broad-shouldered, and weathered by long deployments, he noticed details other people ignored. He saw Atlas checking every direction before moving. He noticed the loose but perfectly controlled leash. He recognized the unmistakable focus of a genuine service dog. Noah gave a small nod of respect before continuing toward the square. Not everyone shared that respect. Near the fountain, 3 young men laughed loudly while holding a phone mounted on a stabilizer, chasing online attention with one prank after another. Their jokes grew louder whenever strangers glanced their way. One pointed toward Emily and Atlas. Another grinned as if he had discovered the perfect opportunity for another viral clip. The camera kept rolling while they whispered among themselves. Around them, dozens of people continued enjoying the peaceful morning, unaware that curiosity can become cruelty when empathy disappears. Atlas sensed the change before anyone else did. His ears shifted, his posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. He slowed his pace without alarming Emily, placing himself slightly closer to her left side while scanning the approaching footsteps. Emily felt the subtle movement through the harness. "What is it, buddy?" she asked with complete trust. Atlas answered only by standing a little taller. Noah noticed it too. Years of working beside military canines had taught him that dogs like Atlas never reacted without reason. He set his coffee on a nearby bench and quietly watched. The breeze seemed to pause. The laughter near the fountain suddenly sounded different. One careless decision was only seconds away from changing every life standing in that square. And before the church bells could finish their final echo, every person watching would discover that true strength is often carried on 4 faithful paws. Atlas did not bark. He never barked without purpose. Instead, he shifted half a step closer to Emily, his broad shoulder gently touching her leg as though quietly asking her to slow down. Emily trusted every movement. She had learned years ago that Atlas noticed the world long before she ever. Since the change in the air, she smiled faintly and rested her fingers against the familiar leather harness. "It is all right," she whispered. "I know you are watching for both of us." The German shepherd kept his gaze fixed ahead. His breathing remained steady, but his ears tracked every sound around the square with remarkable precision. The laughter from the three young men echoed across the fountain, louder now, mixed with the electronic chime of a phone recording another live stream. One of them pointed toward Atlas, while another exaggerated a whisper that made the group burst into laughter again. They were searching for attention, convinced that strangers existed only as characters for their entertainment. Nearby visitors exchanged uncertain glances before quickly returning to their conversations. It was easier to pretend nothing unusual was happening. Noah Walker quietly observed everything from beside the bench where his untouched coffee was already beginning to cool. Years in the Marine Corps had taught him that trouble almost always announced itself in subtle ways before it arrived in full view. He recognized the pattern immediately. Nervous laughter, constant glances toward the camera, small movements designed to provoke a reaction without appearing openly threatening. He had seen similar behavior during tense moments overseas, although this peaceful Georgia square could not have looked more different from the places stored in his memory. Still, human nature often wore the same expression regardless of location. Emily, unaware of the attention surrounding her, paused beside a local violinist whose gentle melody floated through the oak trees like a quiet prayer. She tilted her head slightly toward the music. "Beautiful," she said softly. "Do you hear that, Alice?" The dog relaxed for only a moment, his tail giving the smallest movement before his focus returned to the approaching footsteps. Every instinct inside him remained devoted to one simple mission: keep Emily safe. Nothing else mattered. An elderly woman standing near the flower beds watched the pair with a warm smile. "What a beautiful dog," she quietly told her husband. "Look how carefully he guides her." The older man nodded with genuine admiration. "That is more than training," he replied. "That is loyalty." Their words drifted through the morning air, unheard by Emily, but noticed by Noah, who found himself smiling for the first time that day. Then one member of the group stepped forward, still grinning, toward the phone balanced in his friend's hand. Another casually walked several feet to the side, as if trying to create a better camera angle. The third looked around the square, apparently pleased that enough people might witness whatever came next. Atlas instantly adjusted his position again, placing himself completely between Emily and the unfamiliar footsteps. Emily sensed the change through the harness. "Someone there?" she asked politely, her voice calm and friendly. No answer came, only another burst of laughter. Noah's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. He did not rush forward. Experience had taught him that timing often mattered more than speed. He simply began walking in their direction with measured, confident steps, neither hurried nor hesitant. Around the fountain, the cheerful sounds of the square slowly faded beneath a growing feeling that something was no longer quite right. A child stopped chasing pigeons and looked toward Emily. The violinist lowered his bow for a brief second before continuing the melody. Even the breeze seemed to lose its playful rhythm beneath the ancient oak branches. Atlas remained perfectly composed. His amber eyes never left the three young men. His breathing stayed controlled. His paws held firm against the brick walkway. There was no fear inside him, only discipline, patience, and an unwavering promise that the young woman holding his harness would never face the world alone. And somewhere deep inside Noah Walker, an old instinct whispered the same warning it had whispered countless times before. The situation had not crossed the line yet, but it was only one careless choice away from becoming something that every person standing in Franklin Square would remember for the rest of their lives. The young men exchanged amused glances, encouraged by the growing audience gathering around their phones. Instead of walking away, one of them slowly circled a few feet to Emily's right, careful enough to appear harmless, careless enough to ignore the invisible boundary every trained service dog protects. Alice responded exactly as he had been taught. He neither growled nor lunged. He simply adjusted his position with quiet precision until his body once again stood between Emily and the unfamiliar movement. His calm discipline seemed almost impossible, especially to people who believe courage always arrived with noise. Emily sensed another gentle shift through the harness and tilted her head slightly. "Someone is walking around us. Are they?" she asked with genuine curiosity rather than fear. A middle-aged couple standing nearby looked uncomfortable but remained silent. They had witnessed enough to know something felt wrong, yet they hesitated, hoping someone else would step forward first. That silent hesitation spread through the square like a shadow. Noah Walker continued walking at an unhurried pace, his boots making soft sounds against the old brick path. His face remained calm, but years of military service had sharpened his awareness of tiny details. He noticed the phone camera deliberately following Atlas instead of Emily. He noticed the exaggerated smiles that never reached the young men's eyes. Most importantly, he noticed Atlas refusing every invitation to lose his composure. That alone told Noah everything he needed to know about the dog's remarkable training. Atlas was not simply obeying commands. He was making decisions. The violinist near the fountain lowered his instrument for a brief moment, as if uncertain whether to continue playing. The melody faded into the rustling oak leaves overhead before returning again, softer now, almost prayerful. Emily smiled toward the music without realizing the atmosphere around her had completely changed. "I always imagine the trees dancing when I hear violin music," she said quietly to Atlas. "Maybe one day you will describe it to me in your own way." Atlas gently brushed his shoulder against her leg again, a familiar gesture that always meant he was paying close attention. Across the walkway, one member of the group suddenly crouched several feet away, calling softly as though trying to invite the German shepherd closer. Atlas never moved. His eyes remained focused. His breathing stayed even. Every ounce of his attention belonged to the young woman holding the harness. The failed attempt drew another round of laughter from the group, but now the sound carried an uneasy edge. They had expected excitement. Instead, they were being quietly outmatched by the patience of a dog. Several bystanders began lifting their own phones, not to encourage the prank, but to document what was unfolding. An elderly veteran wearing a faded ball cap folded his newspaper beneath one arm and frowned. A mother gently guided her little son a few steps farther away while whispering, "Stay close to me." Even the pigeons fluttering around the fountain scattered into the air as though sensing a change invisible to everyone else. Noah finally stopped only a short distance away. His posture remained relaxed, his hands resting naturally at his sides. He had learned long ago that confidence rarely needed dramatic gestures. Sometimes simply being present changed the direction of a moment. One of the young men noticed him and shrugged dismissively before turning back toward the camera with another grin. They still believed they controlled the story. They had no idea that dozens of quiet witnesses were now paying attention for entirely different reasons. Emily, unaware of the silent circle forming around her, reached down to gently scratch behind Atlas's ear. "Thank you for always taking care of me," she whispered with complete trust. Atlas briefly leaned into her hand before returning to his alert stance. Noah felt something tighten in his chest. He remembered another German shepherd many years earlier, another partner who had once stood just as faithfully between danger and the people depending on him. Some memories never truly leave a Marine. They simply wait for the right moment to remind him who he is. As the church clock began striking the quarter hour, the final chime echoed across Franklin Square. The peaceful morning still looked exactly the same, yet beneath its calm surface the next few seconds were already moving quietly into place, carrying with them a lesson that none of the people gathered beneath those ancient oak trees would ever forget. One careless laugh broke the fragile stillness hanging over Franklin Square. The tallest of the three young men stepped forward with an exaggerated smile, glancing toward the phone recording every second as though the approval of strangers mattered more than the dignity of the people standing before him. He waved one hand in front of Atlas, hoping for a dramatic reaction. The German shepherd did not move. His eyes remained calm. His breathing stayed measured. Every instinct told him to remain focused on Emily, and nothing around him seemed important enough to break that promise. "He is ignoring us," one of the others muttered with obvious disappointment. Another shrugged before taking a few slow steps closer, stopping just outside the space Atlas had quietly claimed as Emily's safe zone. Emily sensed unfamiliar footsteps drawing nearer and offered the same kindness she extended to everyone she met. "Good morning," she said with a warm smile. "Could you please tell me if you need to get by? Atlas will make room for you." Her gentle voice landed like sunlight on cold stone, yet no one answered. Instead, another burst of laughter drifted across the square. Several people lowered their eyes, suddenly embarrassed to witness a moment that no longer felt amusing. Noah Walker watched the exchange without interrupting. His experience had taught him that character often revealed itself when people believed nobody would hold them accountable. Around him, more bystanders quietly stopped walking. A father carrying a little girl paused beside the fountain. Two tourists folded the map they had been studying. Even the violinist allowed his final note to fade into silence. Franklin Square, so lively only minutes before, now seemed to breathe more slowly. Atlas remained perfectly still until one unexpected movement changed everything. A hand reached toward the leather harness, not with violence, but with the careless curiosity of someone treating a working service dog like a prop in a performance. Before those fingers could make contact, Atlas calmly shifted sideways, placing his own body between the reaching hand and Emily without making the slightest sound. The movement was graceful, disciplined, almost beautiful in its precision. Emily felt the familiar adjustment immediately. "Thank you, buddy," she whispered. "I know you're keeping me pointed in the right direction." Noah felt quiet admiration rising inside him. That was exactly how a professionally trained service dog should respond. No aggression, no panique, only protection through positioning and trust. The young men, however, interpreted the calm response as another opportunity to entertain their online audience. "Look at this," one of them called toward the camera with a grin. "He thinks he is some kind of bodyguard." A few nervous chuckles answered him, but they were noticeably fewer than before. The mood had shifted. People were no longer watching for amusement. They were watching because something inside them recognized that a line was slowly being approached. An elderly veteran stepped closer to Noah and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "That dog has more discipline than most people I have met." Noah nodded once without taking his eyes off Atlas. "That is because somebody earned his trust instead of demanding it." The old man smiled quietly before falling silent again. Emily lifted her face toward the breeze, unaware of the dozens of eyes now resting on her and the faithful companion beside her. The scent of blooming magnolias drifted through the square, mixing with roasted coffee and fresh bread from a nearby bakery. For one brief moment, the peaceful morning tried to reclaim itself. Then Atlas froze. His ears lifted. His head turned slightly toward the far end of the street. It was not the young men this time. It was something else, something distant, something almost hidden beneath the ordinary sounds of the city. Noah noticed the change immediately. Years beside military working dogs had taught him that when a dog like Atlas focused with such complete intensity, there was always a reason. He slowly followed the direction of Atlas's gaze toward the nearby intersection, where traffic continued flowing. Beneath the green light, completely unaware that within moments the quiet courage of one faithful German shepherd would be tested in a way no training exercise could ever prepare him for. Atlas remained perfectly still, but Noah recognized the subtle signs that most people would never notice. The German shepherd's ears were angled toward the intersection. His breathing slowed. His weight shifted almost imperceptibly onto his front paws. It was the posture of a dog collecting information rather than reacting to it. Noah had seen military working dogs assume that exact stance before detecting danger long before human eyes could identify it. He quietly took another step forward, his attention now divided between the faithful service dog and the traffic moving beyond the old oak trees. Emily sensed the slight tension through the harness and gently rested her hand against Atlas's shoulder. "You hear something, do you not?" she asked with a peaceful smile. "I trust you." Those three simple words settled over Atlas like another command, although no command was needed. Trust had always been stronger than instruction. Around the square, the atmosphere continued changing. The young men holding the phone noticed that their audience was no longer laughing. The comments streaming across the live broadcast had begun to question what they were doing instead of encouraging it. One of them forced another smile, determined to recover the mood. "Relax," he said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "We are only making a funny video." No one answered. Even the people recording with their own phones remained silent. The elderly veteran folded his arms across his chest. The violinist quietly lowered his instrument onto the bench beside him. A little girl looked up at her father and whispered, "Why are they bothering the nice dog?" Her father could only shake his head. Sometimes children recognized kindness faster than adults did. Atlas never looked toward the voices. His attention stayed fixed on the distant street. A city bus rolled through the green light. Cyclists crossed the next intersection. Delivery vans passed beneath rows of waving oak branches. Everything appeared ordinary, yet something inside the German shepherd refused to relax. Noah trusted that instinct. He glanced toward the traffic and noticed a large delivery truck several hundred feet away. Nothing about it immediately appeared unusual, but Atlas continued watching with complete concentration. The Marine felt an old memory stir inside him. During one deployment, his military working dog had frozen exactly this way moments before identifying a hidden danger no human had yet recognized. That experience had taught Noah a lesson he never forgot. When a good dog paid attention, wise people did the same. Emily smiled toward the warmth of the morning sun touching her face. "It feels brighter now," she said softly. "I cannot see it, but I always know when the clouds move away." Atlas briefly nudged her hand with his nose before returning to his watchful stance. The quiet affection between them seemed to soften the hearts of everyone standing nearby. An elderly woman wiped a tear from the corner of her eye without fully understanding why the simple exchange had moved her so deeply. Loyalty often spoke most clearly without words. The young men shifted uneasily as more bystanders continued filming. Their confidence slowly faded beneath the growing weight of public silence. One lowered his phone slightly. Another glanced toward the exit of the square, as though wondering whether the joke had already gone too far. The third forced an awkward laugh that echoed without enthusiasm. Noah finally spoke, his calm voice carrying across the bricks without anger or accusation. "A service dog is working every second that harness is on. Respect costs nothing." His words were steady, almost gentle, yet they settled over the gathering with unmistakable authority. No one interrupted him. The breeze carried the scent of fresh rain somewhere far beyond the city, even though the sky above remained blue. Church bells faded into the distance. Birds resting among the branches suddenly lifted into the air all at once, circling above the square before disappearing toward the river. Atlas's muscles tightened for the first time that morning. Noah followed the direction of the dog's unwavering gaze. Once more, the delivery truck was much closer now. Something about its movement no longer felt quite right. The driver appeared to be struggling to slow it as the vehicle approached the busy crosswalk, and before anyone else fully understood what was happening, Atlas made a decision that would forever change the lives of every person standing in Franklin Square. Atlas moved before anyone else understood why. Without a single bark, he leaned his full weight into the harness, guiding Emily 2 quick steps backward toward the edge of the brick walkway. The movement felt unusual to her. Atlas never changed direction without purpose. She tightened her grip on the leather handle, but never resisted. Years of walking beside him had taught her that hesitation could be more dangerous than trust. "Atlas," she asked softly, "what do you hear?" The answer came not through words, but through another determined pull that gently turned her away from the crosswalk. Noah Walker's attention snapped toward the approaching delivery truck. At first glance, it looked like every other commercial vehicle rolling through Savannah on a Saturday morning. but then he noticed the subtle details. The truck was moving slightly faster than the surrounding traffic. Its engine sounded strained. Most telling of all, the driver was leaning forward over the steering wheel with both hands gripping it tightly. His expression filled not with distraction, but with urgent concentration. Something was wrong. Noah immediately raised one hand toward the nearby pedestrians. "Everyone, please step back from the curb," he called in a calm but commanding voice. His years in the Marine Corps had taught him that panic spreads faster than danger itself. Confidence saved precious seconds. Several people instinctively obeyed without questioning him. Parents reached for their children's hands. The elderly veteran gently guided his wife farther from the street. The violinist picked up his instrument and quietly moved away from the edge of the sidewalk. Even the three young men who had spent the morning chasing online attention stopped laughing as they noticed the sudden change in the atmosphere. The phone recording. Their live stream slowly lowered. Atlas continued guiding Emily until both of them stood several feet farther from the intersection. Emily sensed the urgency in every careful movement. Her heartbeat quickened, yet her voice remained remarkably steady. "I trust you," she whispered again, gently resting her free hand against Atlas's neck. The German shepherd's ears remained fixed toward the street. Every muscle in his body was alert, but there was no fear in his posture, only purpose. The delivery truck entered the intersection as the traffic signal changed. A sharp sound echoed through the morning air, followed by the unmistakable squeal of tires searching for traction. The driver managed to steer away from the busiest part of the crosswalk, bringing the truck safely toward an open stretch beside the square before it finally rolled to a complete stop. A deep silence settled over Franklin Square. The danger had passed almost as quickly as it had appeared, but no one seemed ready to breathe again. The driver climbed out immediately, visibly shaken, and raised both hands apologetically. My brakes stopped responding. He called with relief, still trembling in his voice. "I am so sorry. I was trying everything I could to keep it under control." Emergency responders were already being notified by several witnesses, but what captured everyone's attention was not the truck. It was Atlas. The faithful German shepherd stood quietly beside Emily exactly where he had guided her moments earlier. Had they remained at the curb for only a few seconds longer, they would have been standing far closer to the unexpected path of the truck. Emily reached down and wrapped both arms around Atlas's neck. "Good boy," she whispered with emotion filling every word. "You knew before any of us did." Tears quietly formed in the eyes of several people watching. Noah felt a familiar weight settle inside his chest. He had witnessed extraordinary courage during his years of service, yet somehow this simple moment felt just as powerful. A dog had trusted his instincts. A young woman had trusted her dog. Together, they had transformed what could have become tragedy into nothing more than a frightening memory. The three young men stood speechless, their phones still recording, but no one watching their live stream seemed interested in jokes anymore. Thousands of comments began appearing faster than anyone could read them. Nearly every message carried the same question: why they spent the morning mocking the very dog who had just quietly protected the person who depended on him more than anyone else in the world. The silence that settled over Franklin Square felt heavier than any shout. For several long seconds, nobody seemed interested in speaking because the truth had already said everything that words could not. Emily continued holding Atlas close, unaware of the stunned expressions surrounding her. She could only feel the steady rise and fall of his breathing beneath her hands, and to her that familiar rhythm meant safety. "You took care of me again," she whispered with quiet gratitude. "I knew you would." Atlas gently rested his head against her shoulder for only a brief moment before returning to his alert posture, as though reminding himself that his work was never truly finished. Noah Walker slowly walked toward them, his calm expression softened by admiration. "Miss," he said gently, careful not to startle her, "your partner is one remarkable dog." Emily smiled toward the unfamiliar voice. "Thank you. His name is Atlas. Everyone tells me I rescued him, but I have always believed he rescued me." Noah felt those words settle deep inside him. During his years as a Marine, he had known men who would have trusted a working dog with their own lives. And standing before Atlas now, he understood exactly why. The elderly veteran stepped closer and removed his faded cap out of respect. "That dog deserves every honor a person could give," he said quietly. Around him, several others nodded in silent agreement. The violinist picked up his instrument once again, but instead of returning to the cheerful melody from earlier, he played a slow and gentle hymn that drifted through the old oak trees like a prayer. The notes floated across the square, blending with the rustling leaves and the distant ringing of church bells until the entire place seemed wrapped in unexpected peace. The three young men stood frozen near the fountain. Their phone was still streaming live, but none of them looked at the screen anymore. One slowly lowered his eyes toward the brick walkway. Another quietly slipped the recording device into his pocket without ending the broadcast. Thousands of viewers had already witnessed everything. The comments flooding across the screen no longer rewarded jokes or reckless behavior. Instead, they praised the quiet courage of a faithful service dog and questioned why kindness had become entertainment in the first place. Noah glanced toward the young men, then back at Atlas. His voice remained calm, free from anger. The strongest protectors are often the ones who never have to prove how strong they are. No accusation followed. None was necessary. Sometimes dignity carried greater weight than punishment. A police officer and several emergency responders soon arrived to confirm that the delivery truck had experienced a sudden mechanical failure. The driver repeated his apology to everyone nearby, visibly relieved that no one had been harmed. Witnesses described how Atlas had calmly guided Emily away from the curb before anyone else recognized the danger. One firefighter knelt beside the German shepherd with genuine respect. "Good work, partner," he said softly. Atlas accepted the gentle praise with little more than a slow wag of his tail before turning his attention back toward Emily, making certain she remained comfortable amid the growing crowd. Then a woman wearing navy blue medical scrubs approached from the edge of the square. She had been leaving a nearby veterinary outreach event when she heard what had happened. After introducing herself, she politely asked Emily if she could quickly examine Atlas as a precaution. Emily agreed immediately, trusting the concern in the woman's voice. The veterinarian gently ran careful hands along Atlas's shoulders, back, and ribs while the German shepherd stood perfectly still, never once taking his eyes off Emily. At first, everything appeared normal. Then the veterinarian paused. Her expression changed almost imperceptibly. She carefully repeated the examination over one section of Atlas's side before looking toward Noah with quiet concern. "He is still standing," she said almost to herself, "but I do not understand how." Noah's heart tightened. The veterinarian looked back at Emily with remarkable kindness before speaking in a voice so soft that the entire crowd instinctively leaned closer to hear. "I think Atlas has been carrying an injury for longer than anyone realized, and after what he just did today, we need to find out exactly how long he's been protecting you while silently carrying that burden." Emily's smile slowly faded as she heard the unexpected concern in the veterinarian's voice. Her fingers instinctively found Atlas's thick fur once again, gently stroking the familiar place behind his ears where he always relaxed after a long walk. "Is he all right?" she asked quietly. There was no panic in her words, only the deep worry of someone asking about a member of her family. The veterinarian knelt beside the German shepherd, allowing him to sniff her hand before continuing the examination with slow, careful movements. Atlas remained perfectly still. His calm obedience never wavered, although Noah could now see the faint stiffness in the dog's posture that had escaped everyone's attention earlier. Looking back, the signs had always been there. Atlas had shifted his weight more often than expected. He had lowered himself carefully whenever Emily paused. None of it had seemed unusual in the middle of such an emotional morning. Now every small detail suddenly carried new meaning. "I cannot be certain until we take images," the veterinarian explained gently, "but I believe he may have been working with an injury that has been healing on its own for several weeks." Dogs like Atlas are extraordinary at hiding pain, especially when they believe someone depends on them. Emily lowered her head, overcome by quiet emotion. He never told me, she whispered, her voice trembling with sadness. Noah's expression softened. That is because protecting you has always mattered more to him than his own comfort, he said. The words were simple, yet every person standing nearby understood their weight. The elderly veteran slowly nodded. That is what real service looks like, he murmured. It keeps giving long after nobody notices the sacrifice. The violin continued playing softly beneath the ancient oaks, its gentle melody filling the spaces where conversation had fallen away. Even the children who had returned to feeding pigeons now watched Atlas with quiet respect instead of curiosity. One little boy tugged gently on his mother's sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, "is that dog a hero?" She smiled through misty eyes before answering. "Yes, sweetheart, but I think he has been a hero every single day." The three young men remained near the fountain, unable to escape the heavy silence surrounding them. One finally walked forward, his confident smile completely gone. He looked first at Emily, then at Atlas, struggling to find the right words. I did not know," he admitted quietly. Emily turned toward the sound of his voice. "Most people do not know what service dogs do every day," she replied gently. "They wake up every morning knowing someone else's world depends on them." Her kindness surprised everyone, especially the young man standing before her. He lowered his head, ashamed not because someone had humiliated him, but because compassion had answered his mistake instead of anger. Noah watched the exchange with quiet admiration. He had witnessed justice delivered through courts, through discipline, and through consequences, but sometimes the deepest lesson arrived through undeserved grace. An ambulance crew finished checking the truck driver before one of the paramedics approached the veterinarian. "There is an animal hospital less than 10 minutes away," he said. "If you want, we can help make sure the dog gets there safely." The veterinarian smiled gratefully. "I would appreciate that." Emily immediately knelt beside Atlas, resting her forehead gently against his. "Looks like we're taking one more little trip together, partner," she whispered with a smile that tried to hide her concern. Atlas answered with a slow wag of his tail and gently touched her hand with his nose, reassuring her in the only way he knew how. As Noah watched them prepare to leave, he noticed something attached beneath the leather harness that had gone unseen all morning. It was a small laminated emergency information card, slightly worn from years of faithful service. The corner had folded back just enough to reveal a handwritten note tucked inside, and when the veterinarian carefully unfolded it, her eyes widened with quiet surprise before she looked at Emily and softly asked, "Did you know someone left Atlas one final promise to keep before they entrusted him to you?" The veterinarian carefully unfolded the small laminated card from beneath Atlas's harness, taking great care not to damage the weathered paper tucked inside. The handwriting had faded slightly over the years, but every word remained clear. She looked at Emily with gentle eyes before asking, "Has anyone ever read this note to you?" Emily slowly shook her head. "I knew there was emergency contact information there, but nobody ever mentioned a note." The veterinarian smiled softly and began reading aloud. "To whoever walks beside Atlas next, please remember that he will always choose your safety before his own. If he ever hesitates, trust him. If he ever refuses to move, trust him even more. He does not make promises lightly." The square fell completely silent once again. Even the breeze drifting through the old oak branches seemed to pause as the words settled over everyone listening. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Who wrote that?" she whispered. The veterinarian turned the card over and pointed to the signature. "His original trainer, Daniel Brooks." Noah felt something stir inside him. He recognized the name immediately. Daniel Brooks had once been one of the most respected service dog instructors in the Southeast, a quiet veteran who believed that every successful partnership began with trust instead of commands. Noah had met him years earlier during a rehabilitation event for wounded veterans. Daniel always said, "A good dog listens with his heart before he listens with his ears," Noah said quietly. The veterinarian nodded. "That sounds exactly like him." Emily gently wrapped both hands around Atlas's face. So he's been carrying someone else's promise all this time, she whispered. Atlas leaned into her touch with complete peace, as though the words described nothing extraordinary. To him, this was simply another ordinary day of doing the job he loved. Around the square, several people quietly wiped away tears. The elderly veteran removed his glasses for a moment, overcome by memories of faithful companions from long ago. The violinist allowed another slow melody to rise into the warm Georgia air, this one softer than before, almost like a hymn of gratitude. The three young men stood only a few yards away, unable to look at one another. One finally stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Miss Carter, I owe you an apology." Emily turned toward him without hesitation. "Thank you for saying that," she answered kindly. "I hope today helps you understand why service dogs deserve respect. They are not pets while they are working. They are someone's independence." The young man swallowed hard before nodding. "I understand now." Another quietly reached into his pocket, deleted the live stream from his phone, then looked toward Noah. "We thought we were making people laugh." Noah answered with the calm honesty that had guided him through much of his life. "You still have a choice about what people remember. Character is not measured by your worst moment. It is measured by what you do after you recognize it." None of the young men argued. They simply stood in thoughtful silence. A police officer who had observed everything nodded with quiet approval before returning to help direct traffic around the disabled truck. The emergency vehicles prepared to leave, and the veterinarian gently clipped the laminated card back beneath Atlas's harness exactly where it had always rested. "I think Daniel wanted every future owner to remember one important thing," she said. "Trust is invisible, but it saves lives." Emily smiled through her tears. "Then I will keep trusting him every single day." Atlas answered with one slow wag of his tail before standing beside her once again, patient and ready, despite the discomfort he had quietly hidden. Noah watched the remarkable pair with deep respect, believing the morning had already revealed every lesson it possibly could. Yet as the veterinarian helped Emily toward the waiting vehicle, she paused after reviewing Atlas's medical records on her tablet. Her expression changed once more. Looking at Noah with quiet surprise, she said, "There is one detail here that does not make sense at all. According to these records, Atlas should have retired from service almost 2 years ago, but someone made a decision that changed both of their lives forever." The veterinarian looked down at the medical record one more time, certain she had not misread it. She turned the tablet toward Noah Walker, pointing to a date highlighted near the bottom of the screen. "Atlas completed all retirement evaluations 23 months ago," she said quietly. "According to these records, he was medically eligible to leave active service. Yet someone requested an exception, and that exception was approved." Noah studied the document in silence. He understood how unusual that decision was. Service dogs were never asked to continue working simply because people wanted them to. Their health, temperament, and quality of life always came first. Emily listened carefully, trying to understand what the conversation meant. "Are you saying Atlas should have stopped working before we met?" she asked softly. The veterinarian nodded with compassion. "On paper, yes. But there is another document attached to his file." She opened a scanned letter written nearly 2 years earlier. "This request came from the organization that matched Atlas with you." Emily's fingers tightened gently around the leather harness. The veterinarian continued reading. "Candidate Emily Carter has demonstrated exceptional independence training. During every supervised meeting, Atlas repeatedly chose to remain beside her after each session ended. When presented with other placement options, he consistently returned to Ms. Carter. Our staff believes this partnership should proceed despite Atlas approaching retirement because the emotional and behavioral bond between dog and recipient is extraordinary." Noah slowly smiled. "He chose you," he said quietly. Emily stood perfectly still as those words settled into her heart. She had always believed she was the fortunate one, the young woman blessed with an extraordinary guide dog. Now she realized something even more beautiful. Atlas had been given a choice, and somehow, for reasons no report could fully explain, he had chosen her. Tears quietly slipped down her cheeks. She knelt beside him once again and wrapped her arms around his neck. "You could have rested," she whispered. "Instead, you came looking for me." Atlas answered the only way he knew how. He gently leaned against her shoulder, calm, peaceful, completely content. Around them, no one spoke. The elderly veteran removed his cap once more. The violinist allowed another gentle melody to drift through the square. Even the police officers standing nearby paused for a moment before returning to their duties. It felt less like watching a coincidence and more like witnessing something quietly sacred. Noah looked toward the three young men who had remained instead of leaving. Their expressions had completely changed. One finally stepped forward carrying a bottle of water he had purchased from a nearby cafe. "Miss Carter," he said carefully, "would it help if I walked with you to the ambulance?" Emily smiled gently. "Thank you. That would be very kind." Noah noticed the transformation immediately. Earlier that morning, the young man had wanted strangers to notice him. Now he wanted someone else to feel supported. Sometimes grace accomplished what humiliation never could. The veterinarian closed the tablet with a thoughtful expression. "There is still something remarkable about this file," she said. Atlas was approved for retirement because of a recurring rib injury that required careful monitoring. The notes recommend lighter activity whenever possible. Yet every examination after he was paired with Emily shows the injury remained stable. Noah looked down at the German shepherd with growing admiration. Atlas had not ignored his own condition out of recklessness. He had simply continued serving with quiet determination, never asking for sympathy, never seeking praise. His greatest concern had always been the young woman whose hand rested on his harness every day. Emily gently smiled. Through fresh tears, "People tell me that I am brave because I learned to live without sight," she whispered. "But I think courage looks more like this." She rested one hand over Atlas's steady heartbeat. "Showing up every morning, even when nobody knows what it costs you." Noah nodded slowly. He had searched for definitions of courage across battlefields and ceremonies for much of his life. Somehow a quiet German shepherd standing beneath the old oak trees of Franklin Square had answered the question more completely than words ever could. As the ambulance crew prepared to help transport Atlas for further evaluation, the veterinarian's phone vibrated with a new message from the service dog organization. She glanced at the screen, then looked up with astonishment. "You are not going to believe this," she said softly. "Daniel Brooks is still alive, and after seeing today's story, he is driving here right now." Less than 40 minutes later, a silver pickup truck rolled quietly beneath the towering oak trees of Franklin Square. An elderly man stepped out slowly, leaning on a polished wooden cane that looked as though it had traveled thousands of miles beside him. His hair was completely white now, and the years had added gentle lines around kind blue eyes. But the moment Atlas lifted his head, something extraordinary happened. The German shepherd's ears stood tall. His tail moved once, then again. It was not the excited greeting of a dog meeting a stranger. It was quiet recognition. It was memory. Daniel Brooks stopped walking. His eyes immediately filled with tears as he whispered, "Well done, old friend." Atlas gently pulled against the leash, not with urgency, but with unmistakable affection. Emily felt the movement and smiled. "Is that him?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded before remembering that she could not see the gesture. "Yes," he answered warmly. "I am Daniel Brooks." Emily reached out her hand, and Daniel gently shook it with both of his. "I have wanted to thank you for years," she said. Daniel smiled through emotion. "No, Emily. I came here to thank you." The people gathered around them exchanged curious glances. Daniel slowly knelt beside Atlas. Despite the stiffness in his knees, and rested one weathered hand against the German shepherd's neck. Atlas leaned into the familiar touch, closed his eyes for a brief moment, and released a long, peaceful sigh. "You remember me," Daniel whispered. "Of course you do." Noah watched silently from a few steps away. He had seen reunions between Marines and military dogs before, but this felt different. There was no dramatic excitement, only deep trust quietly resurfacing after years apart. Daniel looked toward Emily with a gentle smile. When Atlas finished his training, he passed every evaluation with exceptional scores. He was intelligent, patient, and fearless. But there was one thing we could never teach him. Emily tilted her head slightly. What was that? Daniel chuckled softly. How to choose who he loved. That part was always his decision. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and carefully unfolded an old photograph protected inside a clear plastic sleeve. May I place this in your hands? Emily nodded. Daniel gently guided the picture into her fingers while quietly describing it. This was taken the day you first met Atlas during your training evaluation. Every other service dog returned to the kennel after the session ended. Atlas refused. He sat beside your chair for almost 2 hours. We tried calling him. We offered treats. We even brought out his favorite tennis ball. He looked at all of us as if to say, I have already made my decision. Emily pressed the photograph gently against her heart, smiling through tears. I never knew. Daniel's voice grew softer. We almost retired him before matching him with anyone because of his ribs. But that day, every trainer in the building agreed on something we had never seen before. Atlas was happier walking beside you than resting without you. Around them, no one spoke. Even the children seemed to understand they were witnessing something precious. The 3 young men who had caused so much discomfort earlier quietly stood together near the fountain, listening without interruption. One of them wiped away a tear before anyone noticed. Daniel gently scratched behind Atlas's ears exactly where the German Shepherd loved it most. You kept your promise, he whispered. You found the person you were meant to protect. Atlas responded by resting his head against Emily's shoulder once again, completely content. The veterinarian smiled after finishing another careful examination. His condition is stable, she said. With several weeks of rest and therapy, I believe he will recover well. Relief spread across every face in the square. Noah quietly looked toward the morning sky, grateful in a way he had not expected when he first walked out of the cafe. Sometimes the greatest victories made no headlines. They happened beneath old oak trees, between a young woman who could not see, an aging trainer who never stopped believing, and a faithful German shepherd who had quietly chosen love over comfort every single day. Several weeks passed, and autumn slowly painted Savannah in gentle shades of amber and gold. The ancient oak trees of Franklin Square stood exactly where they always had, their branches stretching across the morning sky like faithful guardians who had quietly witnessed thousands of stories before this one. Yet for everyone who had been there that unforgettable Saturday, the square no longer felt quite the same. It had become a place where strangers remembered that kindness could still change the direction of a life. Atlas spent those weeks resting under the careful guidance of the veterinary team. Daily therapy sessions strengthened his ribs, gentle walks replaced long hours of work, and every examination brought encouraging news. Through it all, Emily remained beside him. She read aloud from her favorite novels while he rested at her feet. She brushed his thick sable coat every evening. Sometimes she simply sat in silence with one hand resting against his shoulder, listening to the peaceful rhythm of his breathing. She often smiled and whispered, "You have spent years carrying me. Now let me help carry you for a little while." Atlas answered each time with the quiet confidence that had always defined him, gently nudging her hand as though reminding her that love had never been measured by who needed help more. Noah Walker visited often. At first, he brought groceries, coffee, and supplies, believing he was simply checking on 2 new friends. Before long, those visits became part of his own healing. Years after leaving the Marine Corps, he discovered that purpose sometimes returned in the smallest acts of service. Daniel Brooks also kept his promise. Every Sunday afternoon, he drove to Emily's home, bringing old training journals, photographs, and stories from Atlas's younger years. Together, they laughed about the stubborn puppy who insisted on carrying every tennis ball he could find, the determined trainee who refused to leave frightened children during demonstrations, and the young service dog who somehow understood compassion before anyone had ever taught it. Emily treasured every story because each one allowed her to see Atlas through someone else's memories. One afternoon she smiled and said, "People always tell me I cannot see the world, but because of all of you, I think I have begun seeing Atlas in more ways than ever before." Daniel quietly nodded. "The eyes can only witness appearances," he replied. "The heart notices everything else." News of what happened in Franklin Square spread far beyond Savannah. The three young men who had once searched for attention decided to use that unexpected attention differently. Instead of posting jokes, they volunteered with a local organization that trained future service dogs. They spent weekends cleaning kennels, carrying supplies, and learning how much patience, discipline, and compassion were required to prepare a dog for a life devoted to another person. One afternoon, they asked Emily whether she could ever forgive them. She smiled gently before answering. "Forgiveness does not erase yesterday. It simply gives tomorrow a chance to become something better." None of them forgot those words. By early November, Atlas returned for his final evaluation. The veterinarian smiled as she reviewed every result. "He has recovered beautifully," she announced. "He may return to light service, but only if he chooses to." Daniel laughed softly because he already knew the answer. The moment Emily reached for the familiar harness, Atlas stood on his own, walked calmly to her, sighed, and gently placed his head beneath her waiting hand. No command had been given. None was needed. He had made the same decision all over again. Noah watched quietly as Emily and Atlas stepped beneath the old oak trees once more, moving together with the same peaceful rhythm that had first captured his attention months earlier. Some partnerships begin with training. Others begin with coincidence. But every once in a while, two souls simply recognize one another. And from that day forward, neither walks through the world alone. 1 year later, the first Saturday of October arrived with the same gentle breeze that carried the scent of magnolias through Franklin Square. The fountain still shimmered beneath the morning sun. Children still chased pigeons across the old brick paths. Musicians still filled the air with quiet melodies that floated beneath the ancient oak branches. Life had continued, just as it always does. Yet for those who remembered that remarkable morning, every familiar sound carried a deeper meaning. Emily Carter walked confidently through the square with one steady hand resting on Atlas's harness. His stride had become slightly slower with age, but no less certain. His amber eyes still searched every corner before leading her forward, and every careful movement reflected the same promise he had made years earlier without ever speaking a single word. People who recognized them smiled warmly as they passed. Some quietly thanked Atlas. Others simply stepped aside with quiet respect. The German shepherd accepted every gesture with calm humility before returning his attention to the only person who had ever mattered most. Noah Walker waited near the fountain holding 2 cups of coffee, smiling as he watched them approach. Since that unforgettable day, the former Marine had become part of their little family. Some mornings they walked together through the square before breakfast. Other days they volunteered at the local service dog organization, helping new handlers discover the same confidence Emily had once found. Daniel Brooks joined them whenever his health allowed, always carrying another old story about Atlas that somehow nobody had heard before. Together, they laughed often. Sometimes they cried. Every moment reminded them that love grows stronger each time it is shared. Near the entrance to the park stood a small bronze plaque installed by the city several months earlier. It did not mention viral videos, newspaper headlines, or dramatic rescues. Instead, it carried a simple inscription: "In honor of every service animal whose quiet devotion gives another person the freedom to walk forward with hope." Visitors stopped to read it every day. Many left with greater understanding than when they arrived. The 3 young men who had once searched for empty attention now volunteered every weekend beside future guide dogs in training. They often welcomed new families with patience and kindness, telling them that respect begins long before a harness is placed over a dog's shoulders. They never spoke proudly about how they had changed. They simply kept showing up, believing that the best apology is a better life. Emily paused beside the plaque and gently rested one hand upon the cool bronze surface. "I wish I could see it," she said quietly. Noah smiled. "You already do." She tilted her head curiously. Ow! Noah looked toward Atlas, who stood peacefully beside her beneath the dancing oak leaves. Because everything written there has been living beside you every single day. Emily smiled as tears quietly gathered in her eyes. She knelt beside Atlas one final time and wrapped her arms around his neck. Thank you, she whispered, not only for guiding my steps, but for teaching so many people how to see with their hearts. Atlas gently leaned against her shoulder exactly as he had done countless times before. The breeze moved softly through the trees. Church bells echoed across the city. Somewhere nearby, a violin began playing the same gentle hymn that had first filled the square on the day their story changed forever. Noah quietly removed his cap. Daniel bowed his head with peaceful gratitude, and everyone standing nearby seemed to understand the same silent truth. Courage is not always loud. Miracles do not always arrive with flashing lights. Sometimes they walk patiently beside someone who cannot see the road ahead. Sometimes they carry quiet pain without asking for recognition. Sometimes they teach broken hearts to become gentle again. And sometimes the smallest act of faithful love leaves a mark so deep that even time itself cannot erase it. As Emily and Atlas continued walking beneath the golden canopy of ancient oaks, their footsteps slowly disappeared into the warm Savannah morning. But the lesson they left behind remained, quietly reminding every soul willing to listen that the strongest guides in life are often the ones who never ask to be followed, only trusted. If Atlas and Emily's story touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and share it with someone who still believes in loyalty and kindness. Thank you for watching.